What if I told you that beneath our feet lies a world so strange, so vivid, that its stories have haunted human imagination for thousands of years? Not the dark, empty caverns of science textbooks, but a realm teeming with gods, monsters, and the echoes of civilizations long gone. This is the Underworld, not just a single place, but a tapestry of 35 astonishing myths woven across cultures, each one more mesmerizing than the last. From the ancient Greeks whispering of Hades and his shadowy kingdom, to the Maya fearing the twisted labyrinths of Xibalba, these tales aren't just relics of the past. They pulse with life, shaping how our ancestors saw death, justice, and even the cosmos itself. Think about it. Why would civilizations separated by oceans and centuries spin such eerily similar tales of underworld journeys? Why do these stories linger in our bones, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Dante's Inferno? It's because they're more than folklore. They're mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest fears and wildest hopes, what waits beyond death, who holds power in the unseen realms, and whether redemption is possible in the darkest corners of existence. And today, we're unraveling 35 of the most remarkable myths ever told, each one a key to understanding not just ancient minds, but something fundamental about ourselves. So let's descend together, not as tourists but as explorers. Picture the flickering torchlight on cave walls where these stories first took shape, the hushed voices of storytellers passing down warnings and wonders. Some of these myths will chill you, others might make you question everything you thought you knew about the afterlife. But one thing's certain, by the time we resurface, you'll never look at the ground beneath your feet the same way again. The Underworld isn't just a myth, it's a living, breathing part of who we are, ready to take the first step. Long before the Greeks spoke of Hades or the Egyptians charted the Duat, the world's oldest recorded underworld myth was already etched into clay tablets in ancient Sumer. This is the story of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, who dared to descend into the realm of her dark sister Ereshkigal, a tale so raw, so layered with meaning, it still echoes across 4,000 years. Picture Inanna at the height of her power, adorned in her sacred jewels and the 7 divine decrees that symbolized her authority. Yet she abandons it all, gate by gate, as she passes through the 7 gates of the Underworld. At each one, the guardians strip away another piece of her identity, her crown, her robes, even her dignity, until she stands naked and trembling before Ereshkigal's throne. But this isn't just a story of defeat. Inanna's death in the Underworld, hung on a hook like a piece of rotting meat, becomes a transformative act. For 3 days and 3 nights, the world above withers without her life-giving presence. Crops fail, love stalls, and the very order of the cosmos unravels. It's only through the cunning of her loyal servant Ninshubur and the sacrifice of her consort Dumuzi that Inanna is reborn, rising back to the world of the living like the first light after a storm. What makes this myth unforgettable isn't just its drama, it's the profound truths buried within. The Sumerians saw Inanna's journey as the heartbeat of existence itself, the cycle of seasons, the balance between life and death, even the cost of wisdom. Every time she descends, it's a reminder that power isn't just about conquest, it's about surrender. That to truly know oneself, you must face the darkest corners of your soul. And perhaps most strikingly, this myth whispers something revolutionary about femininity. Inanna isn't a passive victim. She's a goddess who chooses the descent, who embraces destruction as part of creation. In a world where ancient stories often reduced women to wives or monsters, Inanna shatters the mold, both life-giver and destroyer, sovereign and supplicant. What's astonishing is how modern this 4,000-year-old story feels. Inanna's ordeal mirrors the universal human experience of hitting rock bottom, of losing everything only to rebuild something stronger. Her myth doesn't just belong to the dusty shelves of history, it's a mirror held up to anyone who's ever faced loss and dared to rise again. Inanna's descent didn't just vanish into the sands of Mesopotamia, it rippled outward, shaping myths across civilizations in ways that still surprise scholars today. Take the Greek story of Persephone, abducted by Hades into the underworld. On the surface, they seem worlds apart, one a voluntary journey, the other a forcible taking. But dig deeper and the parallels are uncanny. Both goddesses traverse a threshold between worlds, both lose something vital in the process, and both return transformed, embodying nature's cycles of decay and rebirth. Even the number 7 echoes elsewhere, like in the 7 layers of Dante's Inferno or the 7 trials of the hero in global folklore. But Inanna's legacy isn't just in myths that came after, it's in how her story refuses to stay buried. Modern artists and writers keep resurrecting her. Margaret Atwood wove her into The Handmaid's Tale, where the stripping of identity mirrors Inanna's ordeal at each gate. Contemporary witches invoke her in rituals as a symbol of resilience, while psychologists see her journey as a blueprint for trauma recovery. Even pop culture nods to her. Think of Neo in The Matrix surrendering his ego to awaken, or the heroine of Mad Max, Fury Road, shedding everything to reclaim her power. What makes Inanna's myth endure isn't just its drama, but its radical honesty. Unlike tidy fairy tales, it acknowledges that rebirth isn't pretty. It's messy, painful, and demands sacrifice. Dumuzi takes her place in the underworld, a reminder that resurrection always comes at a cost. That's why her story still grips us. It doesn't promise easy victories. It whispers that true power lies not in avoiding the dark, but in walking through it and emerging, scarred but sovereign, on the other side. If Inanna's underworld was a trial by fire, the Egyptian Duat was something far more intricate, a cosmic courtroom crossed with a deadly obstacle course, where every step could mean eternal salvation or obliteration. Picture this, not a single shadowy realm, but 12 labyrinthine gates, each guarded by deities with names like Flame Embracer and Devourer of Souls, their mouths sharp as knives. To navigate this, the dead couldn't rely on bravery alone. They needed spells from the Book of the Dead, a guide so vital it was often buried with them, inked on papyrus or painted tomb walls. But even with divine cheat codes, the journey was perilous. One wrong turn, and you'd face the lake of fire or the sands of chaos, where demonic serpents lurked like living traps. At the heart of it all sat Osiris, the green-skinned god of the underworld, enthroned in the Hall of Two Truths. Here, the soul's fate hinged on a ritual as precise as it was profound, the weighing of the heart. Feather-light justice, represented by Maat's ostrich plume, balanced against a lifetime of deeds. If your heart was heavier, Ammit, part lion, part hippo, part crocodile, would devour it, erasing you from existence. But if the scales held even, you'd earn eternal life in the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring Egypt's lush Nile banks. What's striking isn't just the Duat's complexity, but its moral blueprint. Unlike later hells focused on punishment, this was a realm of meticulous accountability. The Book of the Dead's negative confession, 42 declarations like, "I have not caused hunger," or "I have not lied," wasn't just a plea for mercy. It was a mirror held up to society, insisting that ethics didn't end at death. Even pharaohs, believed to become gods, had to answer for their actions. This wasn't fear-mongering, it was an early vision of karma where integrity shaped destiny. Yet the Duat also held a radical comfort. Egyptians saw death not as an end, but a cyclical journey. The sun god Ra sailed through its tunnels nightly, battling chaos to rise renewed at dawn, proof that darkness could be conquered. In a world obsessed with order, the Duat was the ultimate test, a reminder that eternity wasn't given but earned, one truthful heart at a time. The weighing of the heart wasn't just a dramatic moment in Egyptian mythology, it was a spiritual snapshot of an entire civilization's values carved into eternity. Imagine standing in that hall, shadows flickering across Anubis' jackal-headed figure as he adjusted the golden scales, your entire existence hanging in the balance. But this ritual wasn't about arbitrary judgment. That feather of mat represented something far more profound, the essence of truth, order, and cosmic harmony. To have a heart lighter than a feather meant you'd lived without greed, violence, or deceit, a standard so high even pharaohs weren't exempt. Archaeologists have found hearts buried with scarab amulets inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, begging them not to testify against their owners. These artifacts whisper how deeply this belief permeated daily life from peasant to ruler. What's remarkable is how this scene transcended religion, becoming a cultural touchstone. The scales of justice we see in courtrooms today, their roots stretch back to Anubis balance, even the concept of a heavy heart as guilt lingers in our language. But the Egyptians took it further. They believed the heart, not the brain, housed memory and conscience. When embalmers preserved bodies, they left the heart in place while discarding the brain as useless. This wasn't just superstition, it reflected a worldview where morality was visceral, a physical weight you carried. Recent discoveries add startling depth to this myth. In 2019, researchers analyzing mummies found many had hardened arteries, their hearts literally heavier from disease. Could this have influenced the metaphor? Other tombs depict peculiar details, guards recording the verdict on palm ribs, or Thoth standing ready to document the outcome like some celestial court stenographer. These weren't just artistic choices, they reveal a society obsessed with documentation, where even the afterlife required paperwork. Yet the most haunting question remains: how many Egyptians truly believed they'd pass the test? A proliferation of heart scarabs suggests widespread anxiety, a fear that no amount of ritual could outweigh human frailty, and perhaps that's why this myth endures. It captures a universal dread, the moment of judgment, the terror of being truly known. Whether carved on tomb walls or echoed in modern tales of final reckonings, the weighing of the heart reminds us that some fears and some hopes are timeless. The Greeks didn't imagine just one underworld, they built an entire ecosystem of the dead, ruled by the often misunderstood god Hades with chilling precision. Picture this realm not as some fiery pit, but as a stratified society mirroring the world above, complete with neighborhoods for the virtuous, the ordinary, and the damned. At its heart flowed 5 rivers, each with its own grim purpose. The Styx, most famous, wasn't just a waterway, it was a binding oath. God swore upon its waters, knowing that breaking such vows meant 9 years of exile from Olympus. Then there was Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, where souls drank to erase their earthly memories before reincarnation, a detail later echoed in Plato's philosophies. But no entry to Hades was possible without Charon, the skeletal ferryman demanding an obol coin for passage. Archaeologists have found graves across Greece with coins placed on corpses' eyes or mouths, proving how deeply this belief took root. Those who couldn't pay were doomed to wander the shores for a century, a fate so feared that Greeks buried their dead with small change long after other rituals faded. And here's where the myth twists. Charon wasn't some mindless grim reaper. In rare vase paintings, he's shown bargaining with heroes like Heracles, even letting the living cross if they had the nerve to ask. Beyond his ferry lay the Asphodel Meadows, a misty purgatory few modern retellings mention. This wasn't heaven or hell, but a monotonous eternity for ordinary souls, those neither virtuous enough for Elysium nor wicked enough for Tartarus. Imagine endless fields of grey flowers, shades milling about like sleepwalkers, their identities fading with each passing century. Homer's Odyssey gives us the haunting image of Achilles here, famously declaring he'd rather be a living slave than a dead hero. It's a far cry from the glorious afterlife we associate with Greek heroes, revealing their complex views on mortality. Yet Hades himself is the most fascinating enigma. Unlike the devilish figures of later religions, he wasn't evil, just ruthlessly just. When Persephone ate those pomegranate seeds, he held her to the letter of their contract. When Orpheus looked back, he enforced the rule without malice. Even his kidnapping of Persephone was framed as a political marriage in some texts sanctioned by Zeus. This wasn't a realm of arbitrary torment, but one where actions had inevitable consequences. Recent excavations in the Peloponnese unearthed offerings to Hades, usually black animals, suggesting some Greeks sought his favor, not just feared his judgment. And perhaps that's the real lesson of this underworld. The Greeks didn't shy from darkness. They mapped it, negotiated with it, even found a strange order within it. Their underworld wasn't just a cautionary tale, it was a mirror held up to life's own complexities, where every soul, from the heroic to the mediocre, had to find their own way across the water. Of all the souls who dared to cross into Hades' domain, none walked as boldly or as foolishly as Orpheus, the poet whose music could bend reality itself. His story isn't just a myth about love and loss, but a searing meditation on what happens when genius meets human frailty. Picture him descending through the caves of Tinarum, lyre in hand, his song so achingly beautiful that Cerberus, the three-headed hound of hell, laid down whining like a pup. The Furies, beings of pure vengeance, wept bloody tears at his melodies. Even Hades, the god who never bargained, paused as Orpheus played. But here's the heartbreaking twist. Orpheus didn't fail because he lacked talent or courage. He failed because he was human. When Hades agreed to release Eurydice on one condition, don't look back until you reach the surface, it seemed simple, but that command was a psychological trap. With every step toward the light, doubt gnawed at him. Was she really there? Had the gods tricked him? The moment sunlight touched his face, he spun around and watched Eurydice vanish, her fingers inches from his grasp, her second death forever his fault. This myth's power lies in its unbearable intimacy. Unlike heroes who battle monsters, Orpheus' enemy was his own mind. Ancient Greeks understood that the deepest suffering comes not from external forces, but from the choices we can't take back. That's why artists keep retelling it, from Gluck's 18th century opera, where the music itself stutters when Orpheus turns, to modern films like Black Orpheus, which transposes the tragedy to Rio's carnival. Each adaptation grapples with the same unanswerable question: would we have done any differently? Eurydice's fate is equally revealing. In most versions, she's silent during the escape, a passive figure. But newer interpretations like Sarah Rule's play Eurydice flip the script, giving her agency, even showing her choosing to stay in the underworld. These retellings expose how myths evolve to reflect our changing obsessions, not just doomed love, but autonomy, grief, and the unbearable weight of what if. The myth's endurance speaks to a universal terror, that love, no matter how fierce, can't conquer death. Yet Orpheus' story isn't entirely tragic. Even after his gruesome end, torn apart by Maenads, his head still singing as it floated downriver, his music lived on. The Greeks buried his limbs at the foot of Mount Olympus, where nightingales sang sweeter than anywhere else. That's the final, cruelest lesson. Art outlasts us all, even when we fail. If the Greek underworld was a kingdom of order and the Egyptian Duat a courtroom of cosmic justice, then Helheim, the Norse realm of the dead, was something far more visceral. A land of frost-limbed silence where breath turned to ice in your lungs. Ruled by Hel, the half-living, half-corpse daughter of Loki, this wasn't a place of punishment or reward, but of eerie neutrality. Picture a hall named Iljudnir, sprayed with sleet, its walls glistening with perpetual damp, where the dish on Hel's table was called hunger and her knife famine. Those who died of sickness or old age, not in battle, ended up here, wandering the mist-choked plains, their existence not torment but a numb, unending twilight. What makes Helheim so chillingly unique is how it defies the binary of heaven and hell. Unlike Valhalla, where warriors feasted and prepared for Ragnarök, Hel's realm was indifferent. The dead weren't tortured, they were simply faded like echoes of their former selves. Yet this neutrality hid a pivotal role in Norse cosmology. When Ragnarök, the doom of the gods, began, Hel would release her hordes of the dead to sail forth on Naglfar, a ship made from the fingernails of the deceased. Her army wasn't demons or angels, but the vast, quiet multitude society had overlooked the sick, the elderly, those who'd never held a sword. In this way, Helheim wasn't just a resting place. It was a reckoning. Hel herself embodies this duality. Described as half-flesh, half-rotting corpse, she wasn't evil but inevitable, a reminder that decay follows life as surely as winter follows autumn. When the god Balder, beloved by all, was slain by Loki's trickery, even Odin's pleas couldn't sway her. Her terms were absolute. If every being in creation wept for Balder, she'd release him. But Loki, disguised as a giantess, refused. That single, stubborn tear sealed Balder's fate, proving Hel's domain was beyond even the gods' control. Modern excavations in Scandinavia reveal how deeply this belief permeated Viking life. Graves show warriors buried with weapons, ensuring they'd reach Valhalla, but commoners were interred with wooden hell shoes, practical footwear for the long walk to her realm. Even Christianity's arrival couldn't erase her. The Icelandic saga of Grettir the Strong describes ghosts lingering in Hel's grip, unable to move on. Perhaps the most haunting lesson of Helheim is its refusal to glamorize death. No heroics, no salvation, just the quiet acknowledgement that most lives end not with a battle cry but a whisper. And when the end times came, it was Hel's forgotten masses, not Odin's elite, who tipped the scales. The Norse didn't fear her realm because it was cruel, they feared it because it was fair. Hel's underworld was just one piece of Loki's monstrous legacy, a bloodline so terrifying even the gods trembled. Among her siblings stood Fenrir, the colossal wolf whose very existence was a ticking clock toward Ragnarök. His story begins not with a snarl but with a deception. When Odin first saw Loki's children Hel with her half-dead face, Jörmungandr the world serpent, and Fenrir still a pup, he knew their destinies were intertwined with doom. But where Hel ruled the silent dead, Fenrir embodied a more primal terror, the inevitability of chaos breaching order's fragile walls. The gods didn't initially fear the young wolf. They raised him in Asgard, even playing tug-of-war with him like a pet. But as Fenrir grew, so did his hunger. His jaws could stretch from earth to sky, his strength surpassing even Thor's. That's when the Aesir panicked. Their solution, a game of trust turned betrayal. They challenged Fenrir to break free from magical fetters. First with thin chains he snapped easily, then with stronger bonds he shattered with a laugh. But the third set, Gleipnir, was different, crafted from impossible things. The sound of a cat's footsteps, a mountain's roots, a bear's sinews. It looked like a silken ribbon but held the weight of destiny itself. Fenrir sensed the trick. If this bond is made with treachery, he growled, one of you must place a hand in my mouth as collateral. Only Tyr, god of war and oaths, had the courage to agree. When the wolf realized he couldn't break free, he bit down, severing Tyr's hand. The gods cheered as they anchored Gleipnir to a rock beneath the earth, silencing Fenrir's howls with a sword wedged between his jaws. But this wasn't victory, it was a delay. The prophecy remained. At Ragnarök, Fenrir would break loose, his rage unshackled, and devour Odin himself. What's striking isn't just the myth's brutality, but its tragic inevitability. The gods didn't kill Fenrir because they couldn't. His role in the cosmic cycle was too vital. Like Hel's army of the dead, he was part of a balance even the Aesir couldn't overturn. Recent studies of Viking artifacts reveal how deeply this resonated. Carvings on runestones show the bound wolf beside scenes of Odin's death, a visual reminder that no power, divine or mortal, escapes fate's teeth. Fenrir's binding also echoes a darker truth about authority. The gods didn't win through courage or wisdom. They won through deceit, sacrificing Tyr's honor to buy time. It's a chilling parallel to how societies often handle threats, not by understanding but by force. Yet the myth warns that suppressed chaos always returns fiercer than before. When Fenrir finally breaks free at Ragnarok, his vengeance isn't mindless, it's the fury of betrayal unleashed. This duality, Fenrir as both monster and victim, makes him one of mythology's most complex figures. Modern interpretations, from Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology to God of War, often highlight his tragic side, a creature condemned for what he might do, not what he did. And perhaps that's the most haunting lesson. The binding of Fenrir isn't just an ancient tale, it's a mirror held up to our own fears of the uncontrollable and the price we pay when we choose chains over compassion. While Norse souls crossed mist-choked plains and Greek shades drifted through asphodel fields, the Aztecs envisioned something far more grueling, a 9-layered underworld called Mictlán, where death wasn't an end but an odyssey. Imagine embarking on a 4-year journey through terrain so harrowing they'd make Dante's Inferno seem tame. First, you'd cross the river of blood, choked with screaming souls, then navigate the twin mountains that crushed together like grinding teeth. Next came the obsidian knife wind, slicing invisible wounds, followed by the place of the blackened dead, where eternal darkness swallowed all sound. And that was just the beginning. Ruling this gauntlet was Mictlán, the Bone Lord, a deity so unsettling even other gods shrank from him. Depicted with a skull for a face and a necklace of human eyeballs, he wasn't merely a fearsome figurehead. He was an active participant in the soul's torment, demanding offerings of jade, dogs, or even human sacrifices to ease passage. But here's the twist: Mictlán wasn't a punishment for the wicked. It was the default destination for most souls, warriors and commoners alike. Only those who died in battle or childbirth escaped its trials, whisked instead to celestial paradises like the Sun's House or Tilalocan. The journey's climax, a final test before Mictlantecuhtli's throne, where souls had to present the gifts buried with them, often a precious stone or a lock of hair, as proof of their earthly worth. Fail and you'd wander Mictlán forever. Succeed and the Bone Lord would grant you oblivion, dissolving your consciousness into the void. This wasn't just spiritual recycling, it was cosmic recycling. The Aztecs saw death as fuel for the universe's cycle, with Mictlán's souls nourishing the earth like compost. Yet Mictlán's legacy didn't vanish with the Spanish conquest. Its fingerprints are everywhere in modern Dia de los Muertos, the marigold-strewn altars, echoes of the flowers that once guided souls through Mictlán's layers. The sugar skulls, a playful nod to Mictlantecuhtli's grinning visage. Even the offrenders, laden with food and possessions, mirror the grave goods once packed for the 4-year trek. Scholars argue this blending was intentional, a way for indigenous communities to preserve their beliefs under colonial rule by cloaking them in Catholic traditions. What makes Mictlán unforgettable isn't just its brutality, but its honesty about mortality. Unlike Underworld's promising eternal feasts or torments, it acknowledged death as a grueling transition, a stripping away of self. The Aztecs didn't sugarcoat the journey, yet they faced it with pragmatism, preparing their dead with tools, songs, and even small dogs to guide them. In a way, Mictlán was the ultimate equalizer. No matter how mighty you were in life, everyone faced the same dark road. And perhaps that's why its symbols still resonate, not as relics of fear, but as reminders that death, however arduous, is just another path to walk. While Mictlantecuhtli ruled the dead with bony fingers, another deity haunted the edges of the Aztec underworld, Xolotl, the dog-headed twin of Quetzalcoatl, who blurred the line between life and death. Picture a creature with the wrinkled face of a Xoloitzcuintli, the sacred hairless dog of Mesoamerica, his body twisted like molten wax from his passage between worlds. This wasn't just a psychopomp guiding souls. Xolotl was the god of misfits and reversals, the patron of those born with deformities, and the architect of humanity's second chance. His most astonishing feat, stealing bones, not just any bones, the broken remnants of the first humans who'd been wiped out by the gods in a fit of rage. Ancient codices depict Xolotl descending into Mictlán like a shadow, dodging spectral bats and rivers of scorpions to reach the Bone Lord's throne. There, he tricked Mictlán into giving up the precious fragments, hiding them in a bundle of reeds before the god could change his mind. But escape wasn't easy. As Xolotl fled, the underworld itself seemed to revolt, the ground split beneath his feet, and Mictlantecuhtli's minions gave chase. In one version, Xolotl transformed into a monstrous axolotl salamander to slip through the murky waters, his body evolving in real time to cheat death. Back on the surface, Quetzalcoatl ground the bones into powder, mixing them with his own blood to create a new, resilient humanity. Here's the twist: those bones weren't just raw materials. They carried memory. The Aztecs believed each person's tonally, their life force was stored in the skull, which is why newborns' heads were molded to echo the elongated shape of ancient ancestors. Modern geneticists even found parallels in indigenous Mexican DNA, showing remarkable continuity from pre-Hispanic populations, as if Xolotl's stolen bones still walked among us. But Xolotl's role didn't end there. As the setting sun's twin, he carried the solar disk through the underworld each night, fending off star demons to ensure dawn would come. Parents tied red cords around their babies' wrists, invoking him to ward off birth defects. And when the Spanish arrived with their snarling mastiffs, many Aztecs saw Xolotl's face in those unfamiliar beasts, proof that even conquest couldn't erase his presence. What makes Xolotl unforgettable isn't just his heroism, but his refusal to fit neatly into categories. Deformed yet divine, a thief who gifted life, a dog who walked like a god. His myth acknowledges that creation is messy, that survival sometimes means bending the rules. In a world obsessed with purity, Xolotl was gloriously impure, and that's exactly why humanity needed him. In the tangled jungles of Mayan myth, no underworld was more feared than Xibalba, the place of fright, a labyrinth of horrors where every shadow hid a trick, and even the stairs were alive with knives. But this wasn't just a realm of punishment, it was a cosmic game board ruled by the Death Lords who delighted in toying with the doomed. Enter the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, two ball players whose journey through Xibalba's 9 levels would become the ultimate underdog story, blending sport, sacrifice, and resurrection in ways that still echo across Central America today. Their ordeal began with a challenge no mortal could refuse. The Lords of Xibalba, grotesque figures like Pus Master and Skull Staff, invited the twins to a deadly ball game in the great ball court of the underworld. But this was no ordinary match. The ball was a spinning blade, the hoops were hung with razors, and the penalty for losing was decapitation. The twins knew the stakes. Their own father, the maze god Hunahpu, had lost his head here years before, his skull hung in a calabash tree as a warning. Yet they stepped onto the court anyway, their rubber-soled sandals gripping the slick underground stone. What followed wasn't just a game, but a masterclass in trickery and resilience. The Death Lords cheated at every turn, conjuring phantom balls and shifting the rules. The twins countered with wit, letting themselves be killed and resurrected by magic, then turning the tables by sacrificing a fake animal that brought the entire underworld to its knees with laughter. When the final match came, they didn't win by strength alone. They outsmarted the gods, using a hidden hummingbird to steal the game-winning shot. But their triumph wasn't complete until they resurrected their father from the Tree of Skulls, proving that even death could be undone with enough cunning. Xibalba's horrors weren't just for shock value. The House of Knives, where blades slashed on their own, and the House of Cold, where breath turned to ice, mirrored real Mayan initiation rituals. Archaeologists have found ball courts aligned with cenotes, natural sinkholes considered portals to the underworld, suggesting these games were literal battles against death. Decapitation scenes carved into temple walls often show the severed head sprouting maize, linking the twins' myth to agricultural cycles. Even today, modern Maya play a descendant of that sacred ball game called Pok-Topak, keeping the memory of Xibalba alive. What makes this myth unforgettable is its raw humanity. The hero twins weren't invincible demigods. They bled, schemed, and faced despair. Their victory wasn't about overpowering death, but learning its rules well enough to bend them. And in a world where ball games decided fates and kings dressed as the maze god during rituals, their story wasn't just entertainment. It was a survival guide, teaching that sometimes the only way to conquer darkness is to play its game and win. The terror of Xibalba didn't stay buried in ancient ruins. It clawed its way into modern pop culture, reshaping how we imagine underworlds in games, books, and films. Take Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where Lara Croft stumbles into a nightmarish reimagining of the Mayan underworld. The game doesn't just borrow Xibalba's name, it resurrects its essence. Players navigate twisting caves where walls drip with spectral faces, solve puzzles inspired by the hero twins' trials, and even face off against the Death Lords themselves, their voices echoing with the same taunting malice described in the Populva. What's brilliant is how the game mirrors the myth's core theme. Survival isn't about brute force, but outthinking the darkness. Lara, like the twins, must use wit to escape traps that punish careless steps. But Xibalba's influence stretches far beyond gaming. In Silvia Morno Garcia as novel gods of Jade and Shadow, the underworld isn't a static hellscape. It's a living, breathing courtroom where the protagonist must bargain with the Death Lords for her freedom. Morno Garcia doesn't just recycle the myth, she reinvents it, blending Mayan cosmology with Jazz-age glamour. The Lords of Xibalba here are both terrifying and oddly bureaucratic, demanding paperwork alongside blood sacrifices. It's a sly nod to how ancient rituals often mirrored societal structures. Even in death, there's red tape. Even children's media whispers Xibalba's legacy. The Disney film The Road to El Dorado plays with underworld imagery when the heroes face a crumbling temple filled with booby traps, a clear homage to the House of Knives. Meanwhile, indie comics like Hellboy, The Bones of Giants weave Mayan death gods into Norse mythology, proving how fluid these ancient fears remain. What's striking isn't just the frequency of these references, but their depth. Modern storytellers don't treat Xibalba as a cheap, exotic backdrop. They tap into its psychological terror. The hero twins' ordeal wasn't about gore. It was about psychological endurance, the slow unraveling of certainty in a place where even stairs could betray you. Contemporary horror games like Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice channel this perfectly, making players question reality itself. Perhaps Xibalba's resurgence speaks to something darker in our collective psyche. In an age of misinformation and algorithmic traps, the idea of an underworld that toys with its victims feels uncomfortably familiar. The Death Lords didn't just punish, they gaslit, forcing the twins to doubt their senses. Sound like any social media feed you know, by resurrecting Xibalba, modern creators aren't just mining the past for cool visuals. They're holding up a mirror to our own labyrinthine fears, proving that the oldest myths still have the sharpest teeth. In the shadowed realm of Yomi, where the air itself seemed to thicken with the weight of decay, Izanagi made a choice that would ripple through Japanese mythology for centuries. When his beloved Izanami died, giving birth to the fire god Kagetsuchi, grief drove him to do the unthinkable, descend into the underworld to bring her back. But Yomi wasn't just a land of the dead, it was a corruption of life itself. The moment Izanagi breached its borders, the stench of rot clung to him, and the once familiar face of his wife emerged from the gloom, her body now crawling with maggots, her voice a hollow echo of the woman he'd known. Horrified, Izanagi fled, breaking his promise never to look upon her in this state. As he sprinted through Yomi's tunnels, Izanami's rage transformed her into a shrieking demon, sending the hag-like thunder gods and the armies of decay after him. What followed wasn't just a chase, it was a metamorphosis. Izanagi hurled his comb, which became bamboo shoots to slow the pursuers, then grapes that turned into wine to distract them. But the most pivotal moment came at Yomi's exit, where he rolled a boulder to seal Izanami away forever, dividing the realms of the living and dead. Her final words, a vow to kill 1,000 humans daily, were met with his chilling reply, "Then I shall give life to 1,500. The parallels to Persephone's myth are impossible to ignore. Both stories hinge on a fatal glance backward, a moment of human weakness that alters destiny. Yet Izanagi's flight carries a darker nuance. Where Persephone's eating of pomegranate seeds was a passive act, Izanami's transformation was a visceral unraveling, love curdling into vengeance, beauty into grotesquerie. This wasn't just about the taboo of seeing death's truth, it was about the impossibility of reversing decay. Modern scholars point to Yomi's description as evidence of ancient Japan's understanding of decomposition, with its references to eightfold hiding places mirroring the stages of bodily breakdown. But the myth's brilliance lies in its duality. Izanagi's escape didn't just create a boundary between life and death, it birthed new gods from his purification ritual. As he washed Yomi's filth from his body, Amaterasu, the sun goddess, sprang from his left eye, and Tsukuyomi, the moon god, from his right. Even his discarded clothing spawned lesser deities. Here, the story pivots from terror to creation, suggesting that contact with death, however traumatic, is a necessary catalyst for renewal. Today, echoes of Yomi linger in Japan's Shinto practices. Ritual cleansing at Shrine Temazuya mirrors Izanagi's purification, while festivals like Obon, when ancestors' spirits return, acknowledge the fragile veil between worlds. Even pop culture reinvents Yomi. In the anime Noragami, it's depicted as a bureaucratic nightmare where souls queue for judgment, and in Jujutsu Kaisen, cursed spirits embody Izanami's lingering fury. These adaptations prove the myth's core truth that some darknesses once glimpsed can never be unseen, but they shape the light we create in response. The boundaries between Yomi and Japan's later Buddhist underworld, Jigoku, didn't just blur, they dissolved into something entirely new. When Buddhism arrived in the 6th century, its fiery hells and bureaucratic purgatories collided with Shinto's decaying, visceral Yomi, creating a hybrid afterlife that still shapes Japanese funerals and ghost stories today. Picture this fusion, the Buddhist concept of the 6 realms, where souls cycled through rebirths as gods, humans, or tortured spirits, mapped onto Shinto's sacred geography. Yomi's boulder-sealed entrance became the gateway to Jigoku's 8 hot hells and 8 cold hells, each tailored to punish specific sins. A liar might find their tongue ripped out by iron crows in the Crimson Lotus Hell, while a murderer drowned in the boiling excrement hell, gruesome details borrowed from Buddhist sutras but flavored with Shinto's tactile horror. Yet this wasn't merely a takeover. Shinto's Izanami lingered as queen of the dead, her wrath now interpreted through karmic justice. Meanwhile, Buddhist judges like Enma-O, the stern ruler of the underworld, gained Shinto shrines where families prayed for leniency. The most fascinating evidence of this blend lies in Japan's iconic Jizo statues. These Buddhist protectors of children and travelers wear red bibs, a color sacred to Shinto, and often stand at crossroads, echoing Izanagi's flight from Yomi. Parents still place tiny Jizo figures at grave sites, believing they'll guide lost souls through the merged terrors of Jigoku and Yomi. Modern Japan's afterlife rituals are living proof of this syncretism. During Obon festivals, lanterns light the way for ancestral spirits returning from the underworld, a tradition that marries Buddhist ancestor veneration with Shinto's belief in kami lingering close to the living. Even horror cinema draws from this duality. Films like Ju-on, The Grudge feature vengeful spirits trapped in a limbo between Yomi's decay and Jigoku's punishment, their curses echoing Izanami's oath to kill 1,000 daily. What's remarkable isn't just the coexistence of these beliefs, but how they transformed each other. Buddhist mercy softened Shinto's fatalism, offering paths to redemption through prayers and sutras. Conversely, Shinto's intimacy with nature seeped into Jigoku Hell's rivers became the Sanzu no Kawa, mirroring real Japanese waterways where mourners floated offerings. This fusion reveals a cultural genius for holding contradictions. Death could be both a karmic sentence and a natural cycle, both a courtroom and a misty plane. The legacy pulses through everyday life. In Tokyo's Senso-ji Temple, visitors toss coins at En-Mao's statue hoping to buy goodwill, while Shinto priests chant sutras at hybrid altars. Video games like Shin Megami Tensei riff on this merging, depicting Izanami as a CEO of hell alongside Buddhist demons. Even the language reflects it. The word for hell, Jugoku, carries the weight of both traditions, a reminder that some fears and hopes transcend doctrine. This syncretism offers a profound lesson about belief itself. When Yomi met Jugoku, neither was erased. They twisted together like the roots of an ancient tree, proving that underworlds, like cultures, are never static. They evolve, adapt, and sometimes in their darkest corners reveal unexpected grace. While Yomi and Jugoku spun tales of terror and judgment, the Celtic underworld Anon shimmered like a dream, a realm so lush, so vibrant, that mortal heroes risked everything just to glimpse its wonders. Unlike the choking gloom of Hades or the frostbitten wastes of Helheim, this Welsh paradise pulsed with golden fields, eternal youth, and a cauldron that could bring the dead back to life. Picture a land where apple trees bore fruit in winter, where 9 maiden priestesses tended fires that never burned low, and where the ruler, Aron, rode not with a skeletal army but with ghostly hounds whose howls sounded like distant singing. At the heart of Anon's mystique lay its most coveted treasure, the Cauldron of Rebirth. Not just a vessel but a sentient force, it refused to boil the food of cowards, a detail that reveals the Celts' obsession with honor. Legends tell of King Arthur himself venturing into Anon to steal this cauldron, a quest memorialized in the eerie poem Predu Anon. His journey wasn't a triumphant raid but a haunting failure. Only 7 of his men returned, their minds shattered by what they'd witnessed. This wasn't hellish torment, it was the unbearable weight of glimpsing perfection, knowing it could never be claimed. What makes Anon extraordinary is how it defies underworld stereotypes. Aron, its ruler, wasn't a malevolent figure but a complex ally. In the Mabinogi, he swaps places with the mortal King P-Will for a year, teaching him wisdom and justice, a far cry from the treachery of Hades or the indifference of hell. Even Anon's darker elements like the spectral CW circumflex and Anon hunting lost souls were seen less as predators than as guides, shepherding the worthy to their rest. Modern excavations in Wales hint at how deeply this myth resonated. Cauldrons adorned with solar symbols have been dredged from lakes, likely offerings to this very ideal. And Arthur's doomed quest echoes in later Grail legends, where the cauldron morphs into the holy chalice, proof that some myths refuse to stay buried, only reshape themselves. Anon's legacy whispers that even in death, there's a place where the grass stays greener, the mead sweeter, and where every ending carries the seed of a beginning. But Anon's ghostly hounds weren't just guardians of the Celtic afterlife, they were the forebears of one of Europe's most chilling legends, the Wild Hunt. Picture a storm-choked sky split by the howls of spectral riders, their horses' hooves striking lightning as they galloped across the clouds. Led by figures as varied as Odin, King Arthur, or even the devil himself, this phantom procession wasn't just a fairy tale. It was a harbinger of war, plague, or death, a warning that the boundary between worlds had frayed. The hunt's roots tangled deep into Germanic soil, where Odin, clad in his dark cloak and wide-brimmed hat, raced across the night as Wodanaz, the Furious One. Norse sagas describe his army of Einherjar fallen warriors plucked from battlefields joining him in this eternal chase. But as the myth spread, its shape shifted to fit local fears. In France, the hunter became the cursed nobleman hurler, doomed to ride until his rotting bridal cloak fell apart. Welsh lore whispered of Gwyn ap Nudd, king of the Tylwyth Teg fairies, herding lost souls like a shepherd of the damned. Even Dante borrowed the imagery, painting his Lucifer with wings that beat like sails in a grotesque parody of the hunt's relentless motion. What's fascinating isn't just the hunt's variations, but its role as a cultural barometer. When the Black Death ravaged Europe, sighting spiked peasants swore they'd seen the riders dragging nets full of screaming souls. During the 30 Years' War, German mothers hid children indoors, fearing the hunt would mistake them for prey. These weren't mere superstitions, they were attempts to rationalize chaos. The hunt became a metaphor for uncontrollable forces, from pandemics to invading armies, its leader morphing to reflect whoever locals feared most. Archaeology hints at how deeply this belief was woven into daily life. Amulets depicting horsemen have been found in Viking graves, likely meant to placate Odin. In the Alps, farmers left out offerings of bread and milk to divert the hunt's path, a tradition surviving into the 19th century. Even today, remnants linger. The Scottish slaw, a flock of vengeful fairy birds, echoes the hunt's avian variants, while modern ufologists point to eerie parallels between medieval accounts and contemporary reports of phantom airships. Perhaps the most haunting truth is how the wild hunt blurred the line between the dead and the living. Some legends claim bystanders could be swept up in the frenzy, forced to ride for centuries unless they stole a piece of the leader's clothing, an eerie precursor to tales of fairy abductions. Others tell of hunters stopping to ask for directions, their hollow eyes betraying no recognition of the changed world around them. This wasn't just a ghost story. It was a warning: the past is never truly buried, and sometimes it gallops back when you least expect it. The hunt's endurance speaks to something primal in us, the fear that catastrophe doesn't arrive with a whimper, but with thunderous hooves and unearthly cries. Whether as Odin's army or Annun's hounds, these riders remind us that underworlds aren't always below. Sometimes they ride the storm winds, waiting for the moment to descend. If Annun promised paradise and Helheim offered quiet rest, then Naraka Hinduism's vast underworld was a meticulously designed nightmare where every sin carried its own grotesque consequence. Unlike Western visions of hell as a single pit of fire, Naraka sprawled across 28 distinct realms, each one a custom prison for specific karmic crimes. Picture a cosmic justice system so precise it would make a courtroom look haphazard. Greedy souls, they'd wade through the river of pus, a frothing torrent of bodily filth where every gulp was a reminder of their earthly hoarding. Liars, their tongues would be yanked out by red-hot tongs, regrown only to be torn out again. And those who abused power, they'd rot in Kampepoka, a hell where they'd be fried in boiling oil like the very corruption they'd dished out in life. But Naraka wasn't just about punishment, it was about purification. The length of a soul's torment matched the severity of their misdeeds, measured in kalpas, epochs spanning billions of years. Yet even this wasn't eternal. Like a brutal detox, Naraka burned away impurities until the soul was clean enough for rebirth. Ancient texts like the Garuda Purana describe these horrors not to frighten but to teach. Take the case of the river of pus. Its viscous sludge wasn't random. It mirrored the spiritual stagnation of greed, forcing souls to swim in the physical manifestation of their own moral rot. What's striking is how Naraka's architecture reflects real-world consequences. Tamasra, the hell of darkness reserved for thieves, plunged souls into an abyss where no light ever reached, a direct echo of how stealing severs trust, leaving victims in emotional darkness. Meanwhile, the Asipatravana hell transformed its floor into a forest of sword leaves, slicing the feet of those who trampled others' rights. Even the infamous iron pillar, heated white-hot for murderers to embrace, wasn't just torture. It symbolized the inescapable heat of guilt, a truth anyone who's carried hatred will recognize. Modern Hinduism still grapples with Naraka's legacy. During Pitru Paksha, the fortnight honoring ancestors, families avoid even trimming nails, fearing minor neglect could strand souls in these hells. Temples like Kerala's Guruvayur display vivid murals of the underworld, not as fear-mongering but as moral mirrors. And in unexpected corners of pop culture, Naraka's influence lingers. The video game Asura's Wrath reimagines these hells as battlegrounds, while anime like Hell's Paradise, Jugoku borrow their structure for dystopian landscapes. Yet beneath the gore lies a radical idea: justice isn't arbitrary. Naraka's horrors aren't doled out by a capricious god, but by the unbreakable laws of karma itself. Every punishment fits the crime with eerie precision, offering a kind of dark hope that even the worst deeds can be paid off, and every soul, no matter how stained, gets another chance. In a world obsessed with quick fixes, Naraka's brutal honesty feels almost refreshing. Sometimes the only way out is through. Long before Yama became the stern judge of Naraka's hells, he was something far more relatable, a mortal man, the very first to die. In the ancient Vedas, his story begins not with a throne in the underworld, but with a brother's grief. Yama and his twin sister Yomi were so close, their bond defied the boundaries of life and death. When Yama succumbed to mortality, his passing wasn't just an ending, it was a cosmic turning point. The hymns of the Rigveda capture Yama's raw lament, her pleas for reunion so piercing that the gods had to intervene, creating night and day to force her to move forward. This primal grief etched Yama's first role into history, not as a punisher but as a guide, the one who blazed the trail all souls must follow. Yet as Hinduism evolved, so did Yama's identity. The same figure who once wept with his sister transformed into the unyielding Dharmaraja, the king of justice, presiding over the dead with scales and a noose. His court in Naraka became a place of meticulous reckoning, where scribe gods like Chitragupta recorded every lie, theft, and kindness in ledgers of karma. But traces of his mortal origins lingered. Unlike the merciless demons of other underworlds, Yama's judgments carried a thread of compassion. The Markandeya Purana tells of a boy named Markandeya, destined to die young, who clung to a Shiva linga so fiercely that Yama's noose slipped. Instead of anger, Yama bowed, acknowledging that even death had limits when faced with pure devotion. This duality makes Yama unique among underworld rulers. In Tibetan Buddhism, where he's known as Shinj, he's both fearsome and revered, a symbol of impermanence, his ferocity a mirror to the ego's resistance to change. Jain texts depict him as a celestial bureaucrat overseeing rebirth with mathematical precision. Even in Southeast Asia, his iconography blends terror and wisdom. In Thailand, he's Phra Yom, a bulging-eyed giant who still carries a grandfatherly gentleness in some temple murals. The shift from mortal brother to cosmic judge reveals something profound about Hindu thought. Yama's transformation mirrors humanity's own journey, from fearing death as an abrupt end to understanding it as part of a vast cyclical order. His twin roles remind us that justice and mercy aren't opposites, but two sides of the same coin. And perhaps that's why, even today, Hindus whisper prayers to Yama during festivals like Yamadwitiya, lighting lamps to honor the one who knows both what it means to live and what it costs to die. Beneath the swirling mists of Chinese folklore lies Diyu, an underworld so meticulously organized it makes modern bureaucracy look chaotic. Spread across 18 distinct levels, each one more horrifying than the last. This isn't just a realm of punishment, it's a moral labyrinth where every sin has its own specialized chamber. Picture a soul arriving at the gates, greeted not by a lone grim reaper, but by an entire administration of underworld officials. At the helm sit the 10 Yama kings, stern judges who preside over their courts like celestial magistrates, each specializing in different transgressions. King Qingguang weighs crimes of lust, while King Biancheng oversees treachery, their verdicts delivered with the cold precision of a dynastic edict. The tortures of Diyu aren't random acts of cruelty, they're karmic mirrors reflecting the crimes themselves. Take the infamous Mountain of Knives, where souls who committed violence in life are forced to climb sheer cliffs of razor-sharp blades, their feet shredded with every step. Or the frozen lake, reserved for those who neglected their families, its ice so thick it preserves the guilty in eternal isolation. Even bureaucratic corruption gets its own ironic punishment. Souls are fed molten gold, a grotesque echo of the bribes they once swallowed willingly. But Diyu's true genius lies in its duality. Between the tortures are pockets of eerie beauty gardens where souls rest between judgments, bridges spanning rivers of forgetfulness, even tea houses where scribes record confessions. This isn't just hell, it's a cosmic recycling plant. After serving their sentences, souls drink Meng Po's broth of oblivion and are reborn, their suffering purifying them for the next life. Modern Chinese culture still thrums with Diyu's influence. During the Hungry Ghost Festival, offerings appease restless spirits escaping the underworld's gates. Wuxia novels depict heroes bargaining with Yama kings, while films like Journey to the West send its protagonists spiraling into these nightmarish depths. Even the language preserves it. Phrases like "going to the 18th level" signify unforgivable sins. Diyu's legacy endures because it's more than a threat, it's a moral compass. In a world where justice can feel arbitrary, the idea that every cruelty, every betrayal has its exact reciprocal torment offers a strange comfort. The knives, the ice, the molten gold, they're not just punishments. They're the universe's way of balancing the scales. Every July, when the lunar calendar turns, the gates of Diyu swing open, not as a myth, but as a living tradition that transforms modern streets into bridges between worlds. The Hungry Ghost Festival doesn't just honor the dead. It stages a temporary détente with the underworld, where paper effigies of iPhones and luxury cars burn alongside joss sticks, their smoke carrying earthly comforts to souls in Diyu's clutches. But these offerings aren't random acts of charity. They're strategic diplomacy designed to appease the hungry ghosts of those restless spirits who died without descendants to honor them, left to prowl the human realm with hollow bellies and grievances. The festival's rituals read like a survival guide penned by someone who'd studied Diyu's rulebook. Take the elaborate paper money burned in alleyways, its denominations reaching absurd billions. This isn't mere imitation of wealth. It's inflation-proof currency for the afterlife, where bureaucratic ghosts demand bribes to ease a soul's passage. Families even fashion paper passports and credit cards, anticipating the red tape of the underworld. Meanwhile, makeshift stages host operas performed solely for spectral audiences, front row seats left empty because, as tradition warns, sitting there risks inviting a ghostly viewer to perch unseen in your lap. But the most haunting custom revolves around the gates themselves. In Singapore and Malaysia, entire streets become spirit thoroughfares, lined with flickering lanterns shaped like lotus flowers, symbols of purity that guide lost souls without attracting malicious ones. Communities erect towering King of Hell effigies, their gaping mouths serving as portals for offerings. Yet amid the spectacle lies a razor-sharp etiquette. Fruit offered must be whole, cutting it insults the dead, and no one dares whistle at night lest they mimic the wind that carries ghosts' voices. Archaeologists trace these practices back to Tang Dynasty manuscripts, where Diyu's bureaucracy first merged with folk beliefs. But what's astonishing is how the festival evolves. Modern hell banks print holographic bills, and live-streamed ceremonies allow distant relatives to virtually feed ancestors. In Taiwan, eco-conscious temples now sell biodegradable paper Mercedes, while Hong Kong's neon-drenched districts stage ghost weddings to appease unmarried spirits. The rituals adapt, but the core remains unchanged, a negotiation with the unseen where every burnt offering is a plea, and every empty seat a reminder that the underworld's rules don't expire when the gates creak shut. Beneath the vast Pacific waves where sunlight dissolves into endless blue, the Polynesian underworld Po waits a realm as shapeless as the ocean's depths, where souls don't burn or freeze, but simply dissolve like salt in water. Unlike the fiery pits of Diyu or the bureaucratic layers of Diyu, Po is entropy incarnate, a place where identities unravel and memories bleed into the dark. Ancient chants describe it as Lua o Milu, the pit of oblivion, where spirits fade like foam on the waves, their voices lost in the hiss of tides. There are no judges here, no tortures, no second chances, just the slow, inevitable return to the primal void from which all life emerged. Yet just across Polynesia's cultural tapestry, the Hawaiian Milu offers a striking counterpoint. Named after its ruler, the god Milu, this underworld mirrors the island's strict social hierarchies. Souls arrive to find a structured realm divided into tiers, warriors in one quarter, farmers in another, with the wicked banished to Ki Aloha o Milu, the endless darkness. Unlike Poe's formless decay, Milu operates with the precision of a chief's court. The dead are judged not by deities but by their own ancestors, who weigh their deeds against the sacred laws of Kapu. Violators face punishments tailored to their crimes. Thieves work barren fields that yield only stones, while oath breakers wander labyrinths of whispering winds that replay their lies forever. What makes these two visions so mesmerizing is how they reflect their environments. Poe's watery nothingness mirrors the open ocean's terrifying vastness, where a canoe adrift could vanish without a trace. Meanwhile, Milu's order echoes the necessity of communal survival on isolated islands where breaking taboos threatened everyone. Even their rulers diverge starkly. Poe has no sovereign, only the cold embrace of the deep, while Milu himself is a complex figure. Some legends paint him as a usurper who stole the underworld from the trickster Kamapua, others as a stern but fair guardian ensuring balance between realms. Modern Polynesian artists keep these underworlds alive in surprising ways. The film Mona subtly nods to Poe when the heroine faces Tika, a lava demon whose true form is revealed to be the eroded, forgotten goddess Tifiti, a metaphor for how identity crumbles in the abyss. Meanwhile, Hawaiian hula performances preserve Milu's stories through chants and gestures, like the iconic Eha stance that evokes the bent postures of souls toiling in his fields. Even Tahitian tattoo revivalists' ink patterns once believed to guide spirits away from Poe's pull, turning skin into a literal map of salvation. The tension between these two underworlds, one a formless void, the other a mirrored society, speaks to humanity's dual fear of both annihilation and judgment. Poe whispers that all things, even the soul, must one day disperse like mist. Milu argues that actions, like carvings in stone, endure. Perhaps that's why these myths endure. They don't just describe death. They ask what, if anything, remains of us when the last wave closes overhead. Maui, the shape-shifting trickster of Polynesian legend, didn't just play pranks on gods and fish up islands. He set his sights on the ultimate prize, cheating death itself. Picture the scene, the great hero creeping into the goddess Hainui, Poe's darkened dwelling, his obsidian knife glinting as she slept. Hain, whose name means Great Woman of Night, wasn't just the ruler of the underworld, she was the living embodiment of mortality, her body studded with jagged obsidian teeth and her vagina lined with deadly flames. Maui had a plan as bold as it was grotesque. If he could crawl through her sleeping form, entering her womb and emerging from her mouth, he would reverse the very cycle of life and death, rendering humanity immortal. But legends never reward hubris lightly. As Maui wriggled halfway through the goddess, a small bird, the Piwakawaka fantail, couldn't contain its laughter at the absurd sight. Hain awoke with a thunderous snap of her obsidian jaws, severing Maui in two. His blood stained the morning sky crimson, becoming the first sunrise, while his shattered ambition became a warning etched into Polynesian culture. Death isn't an enemy to outwit, but a natural force as inevitable as the tide. What makes this myth so haunting isn't just its violence, but its layered symbolism. Maui's failure wasn't merely about a botched mission. It reflected the Polynesian worldview that humans exist within nature's rhythms, not above them. Unlike Greek heroes who descended to the underworld for love or glory, Maui's quest was purely for human benefit, making his punishment all the more tragic. The Piwakawaka's laughter carries its own lesson. Some boundaries mock those who dare to cross them. Archaeologists trace echoes of this story in burial practices across the Pacific. From Hawaii to Aotearoa, traditional interments often involved flexing corpses into fetal positions, as if returning to the Earth's womb, a poignant contrast to Maui's failed rebirth. Even today, Maori carvings depict Hain Nui Tipo with swirling koru patterns symbolizing both life's cyclical nature and the razor's edge between realms. Modern retellings like Disney's Mona soften Maui's fate, but the original myth's power lies in its refusal to sugarcoat mortality. Unlike underworld stories promising reward or punishment, this one offers neither. Death simply is, and human cleverness, however extraordinary, can't undo it. Yet there's a strange comfort in that. Maui's blood became dawn, his sacrifice woven into the world's fabric. The trickster who shaped oceans and slowed the sun ultimately couldn't cheat the one law that binds us all, but in trying, he painted the sky with his defiance. Beneath the roots of the sacred world tree, where the earth hummed with hidden currents, the Slavs envisioned Nav, an underworld not of fire or ice, but of damp soil and whispering waters. Ruled by Veels, the horned god of cattle, magic, and crossroads, this was a realm where wealth pooled like underground rivers and the dead moved like shadows through tangled roots. Unlike the punishing hells of other traditions, Nav pulsed with paradoxical energy, both fertile and ghostly, a place where bones decomposed into rich black earth and where the boundaries between spirit and livestock blurred. Veels himself embodied this duality, a shape-shifting deity who could appear as a bear, a serpent, or a shaggy-haired herdsman, his horns curling like crescent moons over a face both wise and wild. The connection between Nav and cattle wasn't just symbolic. It was economic. For the Slavs, livestock meant survival, and Veels's role as their protector made him a god of earthly prosperity as much as the afterlife. Farmers whispered prayers to him before driving herds to pasture, tying red ribbons to barn doors to ward off his trickster side. But this relationship had a darker edge. When drought struck or wolves thinned the herds, people blamed Veels's displeasure, leaving offerings of wool, honey, or even spilled beer in forest clearings, rituals that lingered in folk customs like Bulgaria's Vlasiev Den, where villagers still dress as horned demons to chase away misfortune. Nav cycles mirrored the seasons in eerie harmony. During Koliada, the winter solstice festival, the veil between worlds thinned and Veels's spirit slithered up through cracks in the frozen earth. Families set extra places at their tables for ancestors, sprinkling crumbs into the hearth so the smoke could carry nourishment downward. Come spring, these same spirits were escorted back to Nav through river rites. Effigies floated away on birch bark boats, their journey echoing the melting snow's descent into the groundwater. Archaeologists have unearthed Slavic burials with cattle bones carefully arranged around skeletons, proving how deeply these beliefs were woven into daily life. What makes Nav unforgettable is its refusal to fit neatly into categories of light or dark. Veels wasn't evil, he was necessary. His conflicts with Perun, the thunder god, weren't battles of good versus evil but cosmic checks and balances. Storms Perun's domain nourished the soil Veels's realm, and cattle dung fertilized the fields where grain Perun's gift grew. This interplay birthed myths where the two gods fought eternally, Perun as the eagle soaring above, Veels as the serpent coiled around the world tree's roots, each sustaining the other through rivalry. Modern echoes of Nav's surface in unexpected places. Russian fairy tales teem with talking bulls and fire-breathing horses, remnants of Veels's sacred herds. Belarusian farmers once buried a horse skull under their barns to invoke his protection, a practice that evolved into hanging decorative horse heads on rooftops. Even the word Navi, meaning the dead in Old Slavic, survives in curses like Chayot Navoy, devil take you, literally summoning the underworld's grip. These fragments remind us that Nav was never just a land of the dead. It was the hidden half of existence where every hoofbeat above ground sent vibrations through the world below. While Veils ruled the shadows of Nav, a trio of celestial sisters stood guard at the gates of the world itself. The Zoria, goddesses of dawn, dusk, and midnight, whose vigil kept the universe from collapsing into chaos. Imagine them as the Slavic cosmos's ultimate gatekeepers. Zoria Utraniea, the morning star who threw open the doors of day with rosy fingers. Zoria Vetraniea, the evening star who drew the velvet cloak of night across the sky. And the most mysterious of all, Zoria Polynochnaea, the midnight star who watched over the witching hour when the boundaries between worlds grew thin. Their duty wasn't just poetic, it was apocalyptic. Ancient carvings depict them holding the chains of Simargl, a fiery hound destined to break free and devour the constellation Ursa Minor if their watch ever faltered. The stakes, the unraveling of time itself. This cosmic custody battle reveals a breathtaking Slavic vision of order. Unlike Greek or Norse myths where chaos lurks in external monsters, here destruction hinges on vigilance or the lack of it. The Zoria didn't battle demons, they outlasted them through relentless attention, their presence a living bulwark against entropy. Folk charms still echo their role, with Belarusian grandmothers whispering to the three-star sisters when lighting lamps at twilight, a nod to the belief that every lit flame bolstered their cosmic watch. Yet the Zoria's most fascinating ally was Belobog, the enigmatic white god. While most Slavic deities embodied duality, Belobog stood apart, a rare figure of pure light with no dark counterpart. Unlike Veils's earthy mysticism or Perun's thunderous might, Belobog represented the sun's unwavering justice, his presence ensuring the Zoria stars didn't flicker out. Together, they formed a sacred shift system. The sisters maintained the celestial mechanics, while Belobog fueled their power with solar radiance. Archaeological finds along the Dnieper River reveal how deeply this belief took root. Amber amulets carved with triple star motifs, likely representing the Zoria, have been unearthed in warrior graves, suggesting even battle-hardened Vikings absorbed this Slavic cosmology. Meanwhile, Breton missionaries in the 10th century wrote of Slavic tribes orienting temples to catch the first, last, and midpoint sunlight, literally aligning their worship with the sisters' domains. What makes this myth so gripping is its quiet radicalism. In a pantheon dominated by storm gods and tricksters, the Zoria and Belobog offered a different kind of strength, one rooted in constancy rather than conquest. Their enemies weren't dragons or giants, but fatigue, distraction, the slow creep of cosmic indifference. When Belarusian farmers left bowls of milk out on solstice nights, they weren't just feeding spirits, they were replenishing the universe's caretakers, one sip at a time. The message was clear: even gods need mortal help to keep the stars from falling. Beneath the Arctic's frozen waves, where the ice groans like a living thing, lies Adlavan, a realm of crushing darkness and grinding flows, ruled by the fearsome Sedna, mother of sea beasts and keeper of the ocean's bitter bounty. Her story begins not as a goddess, but as a betrayed young woman whose father, desperate to save himself during a storm, hacked off her fingers as she clung to their kayak. As her blood stained the water, her severed digits twisted into seals, whales, and walruses, while she herself sank to the seafloor, her rage sculpting the very landscape of the underworld. There, in a house built from whale bones and icebergs, she commands the creatures she birthed, withholding them from hunters when her wrath is stirred. Adlavan isn't just a resting place for the dead, it's a glacial purgatory where souls endure a year-long trial, scrubbed clean of their sins by relentless winds and icy currents before ascending to the light. But Sedna's domain is also a vital lifeline. The Inuit, whose survival hinges on the sea's generosity, know that every successful hunt depends on her mood. When famine strikes, when seals vanish and nets come up empty, it's a sign that Sedna's tangled hair, knotted with the sins of humanity, is choking the animals, trapping them in the depths. Enter the Angakok, the shaman, whose role is as perilous as it is sacred. Clad in sealskin gloves and chanting ancient songs, they embark on a spirit journey to Adlavan, their soul descending through fissures in the ice to reach Sedna's abode. The ritual is fraught with danger. To placate her, the Angakok must comb the filth from her hair, a task requiring both physical and spiritual endurance. Some legends speak of Sedna's screams shaking the seafloor as the shaman tugs at her matted locks, the pain of purification echoing through the waves. Succeed, and the sea creatures are released, the hunts resume. Fail, and the shaman's own soul may be claimed by the depths. What makes this myth unforgettable is its raw interdependence. Sedna isn't a distant deity to be worshipped from afar. She's a wounded force of nature, her agony and generosity inextricably linked. Modern Inuit artists carve her image in soapstone, depicting her with a mermaid's tail and a sorrowful gaze, a reminder that ecological balance hinges on respect. Even climate change is framed through her lens. As the ice thins, some elders warn that Sedna's anger grows, her realm destabilized by human recklessness. The rituals endure too. In Nunavut, community feasts still honor Sedna, with elders offering scraps of raw meat to the ocean, a direct plea to the goddess below. And when a shaman's drum echoes across the tundra, it's more than ceremony, it's a lifeline thrown into the dark, a pact between human and divine that says we remember. We listen. Adlavan may be a world of ice and shadows, but its heartbeat pulses in every wave, every hunt, every act of atonement that keeps the fragile balance alive. Sedna's fury isn't just a myth. It's a warning etched into the ice itself. For centuries, Inuit storytellers have woven her rage into tales of famine and vanishing seals, but today, those stories carry a chilling new weight. As Arctic temperatures rise and sea ice fractures, elders whisper that Sedna's anger has never been sharper. The metaphor is uncanny. Her tangled hair, once knotted with human sins like broken taboos or disrespect for the hunt, now chokes with plastic waste and oil spills. The animals she withholds aren't just hidden, they're disappearing, their migrations disrupted by waters growing warmer and more acidic. This isn't folklore anymore, it's prophecy unfolding in real time. Consider the Angakok's ritual in a modern context. When shamans descend to comb Sedna's hair, they're not just performing a spiritual cleanse, they're enacting a cosmic contract between humanity and nature. Each knot represents a broken balance, overhunting, industrial pollution, the hum of icebreakers scaring away herds. Climate scientists working with Inuit communities have documented a staggering overlap between Sedna's myth and ecological data. The same regions where legends say she traps seals in her hair now show drastic declines in marine life populations. Even the timing of ritual cleanses aligns with migration patterns. Elders historically called for ceremonies when prey grew scarce, a practice now echoed in conservation efforts to reduce hunting during vulnerable breeding seasons. Yet Sedna's story offers more than doom. It's a blueprint for resilience. Traditional Inuit laws shaped by her mythos forbid wasting any part of a harvested animal, a sustainability practice centuries ahead of its time. Modern activists draw on this wisdom, merging satellite data with oral histories to track melting ice. In Nunavut, youth filmmakers document elders' stories, framing Sedna's wrath not as punishment, but as a call to realign with the rhythms of the natural world. There's a radical humility here, one that flips the script on Western environmentalism. Instead of saving the Arctic, these traditions ask, how do we regain Sedna's trust? The answer might lie in the ice itself. Researchers recently discovered that microbial life in Arctic sea ice produces a chemical that helps clouds form, literally weaving a protective shield against warming. It's as if Sedna's domain is fighting back, offering tools to mend what's been broken. The parallel isn't lost on Inuit knowledge keepers who have long insisted the land and sea are alive, listening. When a Greenlandic hunter kneels to pour fresh water into the ocean, an offering to Sedna, It's science and ceremony intertwined, a reminder that solutions aren't just technological but relational. After all, the shaman's journey was never solitary. The whole village fasted, sang, and prepared for their return. Today, that collective urgency echoes in global climate strikes and indigenous-led conservation treaties. Sedna's myth endures because it refuses to separate ecology from morality. Her severed fingers didn't just become seals, they became obligations. Every animal alone, every hunt a negotiation with forces far older than civilization. As the ice retreats, her story asks us the same question that has haunted humanity across underworlds and epochs. What will we sacrifice to keep the world from unraveling? Not with grand gestures, but with daily acts of reciprocity, untangling the knots we've tied, one thread at a time. In the red dust of Australia's outback, where the horizon shimmers like a mirage, lies an underworld far removed from fire and ice, the Dreamtime's land of the dead. This isn't a realm of punishment or reward, but a living, breathing extension of the earth itself, where ancestral spirits known as the Yomi and Mimi continue to mold the land long after their physical forms have faded. Picture a place where every rock formation, every winding riverbed is etched with the memories of these creator beings, their journeys frozen in stone and song. When the sun dips below Uluru, casting its crimson glow, some Aboriginal traditions say the spirits awaken, their whispers carried on the wind, shaping the world anew with each passing night. What sets this underworld apart is its inseparable tie to the living landscape. Unlike Hades or Helheim, which exist beneath or beyond the mortal world, the land of the dead is woven into the very fabric of Australia, a parallel dimension accessible through sacred sites or during ceremonial corroborees. The Pitjantjatjara people speak of Waru, the afterlife, where spirits reside in waterholes and caves, their presence marked by ripples in otherwise still waters or the sudden rustle of leaves in a windless grove. These aren't ghosts to be feared, but ancestors to be honored, their wisdom embedded in the dreaming stories passed down through millennia. The creation of this realm is as dynamic as the myths themselves. In Arnhem Land, the Yolngu tell of the Wangar, ancestral beings who traveled the land in the dreamtime, their actions forming mountains and valleys. When they died, their spirits didn't vanish, they sank into the earth, becoming part of the Jang, the sacred life force that pulses through the land. To walk across these sites today is to tread on the bodies of the ancestors, a reminder that the underworld here isn't below, but within. Archaeological finds support this belief. Ancient rock art depicting spirit figures often aligns with geological features, suggesting these stories were maps as much as myths. Ceremonies bridge the gap between worlds. During Kanapipi rituals, dancers adorned with ochre and feathers channel the ancestors, their movements retracing the steps of the dreamtime. The rhythmic thud of didgeridoos isn't just music. It's a vibrational key believed to open portals to the land of the dead. Participants enter trance states, their souls briefly stepping into the spirit realm to gather knowledge or heal the living. Even burial practices reflect this connection. Traditional Larakia burials in northern Australia involve placing the deceased in a hollow log, allowing their spirit to decompose into the earth slowly, merging with the ancestral energy of the land. Modern Australia still grapples with the power of these beliefs. Mining companies negotiating with Aboriginal communities often face unexpected hurdles, not just legal but spiritual. A proposed iron ore site might overlap with a Jukurpa dreaming track where ancestral spirits are said to still walk. To disturb such land isn't just unethical, it's unthinkable, akin to bulldozing a cathedral's altar. Even urban landscapes aren't exempt. In Sydney, construction of the Barangaroo district uncovered shell middens and artifacts, prompting Wugal Ora elders to perform smoking ceremonies, cleansing the area of restless spirits before work could continue. The Dreamtime underworld challenges every Western notion of the afterlife. There's no judgment, no eternal flames, only continuity. A spirit might become the whisper of a creek, the shadow in a gum tree, or the warmth of a campfire ember. This belief fosters a profound ecological ethic. If the land is your ancestors, how could you harm it? Contemporary Aboriginal artists like Emily Kamkaengwa capture this duality. Her paintings of Alhalka, her people's dreaming sight exploding with dots that represent both seeds and ancestral spirits, the living and the dead inseparable. The lesson here is as stark as the outback sun. While other myths warn of underworld torments, the Dreamtime offers a different vision. Death isn't an end or even a separate realm. It's a transformation, a returning, to sit quietly at sunset in the Australian bush, hearing the distant call of a curlew, said to be the voice of a lost spirit, is to feel the truth of it. The land of the dead isn't waiting beneath our feet. It's all around us, breathing in the dust, singing in the rivers, forever weaving itself into the world we walk. While the land of the dead pulses through the earth itself, it's the song lines that act as its living arteries, invisible threads stitching the spiritual and physical worlds together. These aren't just paths, they're acoustic maps sung into existence by ancestral beings during the Dreamtime, each melody encoding directions, landmarks, and sacred lore. Picture a traveler humming a particular sequence of notes, their voice harmonizing with the land's hidden frequencies, guiding them to waterholes or ceremonial grounds, or even to the thresholds where the living might brush against the underworld's currents. The connection between songlines and the dead runs deeper than navigation. In Walpiri tradition, certain melodies belong to the Jukurpa, the dreaming ancestors whose journeys formed the landscape. Singing these tunes doesn't just recount their travels, it summons their presence, blurring time so that past and present resonate together. A rock formation might be both a geological feature and the frozen body of an ancestral kangaroo, its story preserved in verses passed down through generations. When elders sing these lines correctly, they're not merely remembering, they're walking alongside the dead, retracing steps that exist outside linear time. What's astonishing is how these songlines double as underworld pathways. In Arnhem Land, some Yolngu clans describe Baparu, the spirit world, as a realm accessible through specific songlines sung at dusk. The rhythm of clapsticks mimics the heartbeat of the earth, opening doorways where spirits of the recently departed can be heard whispering in the rustle of leaves. During Junguan ceremonies, dancers follow these sonic trails, their bodies painted with the same patterns once worn by the ancestors, effectively becoming vessels for the dead to revisit the living. Archaeologists have found tangible echoes of this belief. Ancient stone arrangements across Australia, like Victoria's Wurdi Yuwang or New South Wales's Ngun, who fish traps align with songlines documented in oral traditions. These aren't just practical structures, they're musical notation in physical form, their shapes mirroring the rises and dips of ancestral songs. Even more striking, some rock art depicts spirit figures holding what appear to be song scrolls, ethereal sheet music for navigating the afterlife. Modern technology reveals uncanny overlaps between songlines and scientific phenomena. Researchers mapping acoustic vibrations in the outback discovered that many songlines follow low-frequency sound corridors where songs carry farther due to land formations. Meanwhile, astronomers note that certain songlines correlate with celestial movements, suggesting these routes aren't just earthly, they're cosmic. For the dead, this could mean journeys that span both land and sky, their spirits riding sound waves to the stars before circling back to sacred sites. The practical power of songlines shines in their resilience. During the stolen generations, when Aboriginal children were forcibly removed from their families, many preserved fragments of songlines as secret lifelines to identity. Even disconnected from country, these melodies became umbilical cords to the underworld of memory, ensuring the dead and their wisdom weren't forgotten. Today, initiatives like the Songlines of the Western Desert Project use digital mapping to safeguard these living pathways. blending GPS with elder knowledge to create hybrid maps for future generations. Here's the profound truth these melodies carry. In Aboriginal cosmology, the underworld isn't static. It's a chorus. Every correctly sung verse tightens the weave between worlds, every footstep in rhythm with the ancestors' gate. To walk a songline is to walk with ghosts not as shadows but as co-travelers, their voices layered into the wind, the rocks, the very pulse of the land. The dead don't rest in this tradition, they sing. And as long as someone remembers the tune, the path between worlds stays open. Deep beneath the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates carved their veins into the earth, an underworld coup unfolded that would reshape the realms of the dead forever. This is the story of Nergal, the god of plagues and scorching sun, whose single act of defiance overturned the throne of Ereshkigal, the same queen who'd reduced Inanna to a rotting corpse. But unlike Hades' sudden abduction of Persephone, Nergal's rise to power was no impulsive act of passion. It was a calculated game of divine politics, played with all the ruthlessness of a desert storm. The tale begins with a banquet in the heavens. When the gods gathered to feast, Ereshkigal, bound to her shadowy kingdom, sent her vizier Namta to collect her portion. But as Namta entered, the other deities rose in respect, all except Nergal, who remained seated, his pride flaring like fever. Enraged, Ereshkigal demanded the impudent god be sent to her for punishment. What happened next twists the underworld mythos on its head. Instead of groveling for mercy, Nergal marched into Ker, the Mesopotamian realm of the dead, armed with 14 plague demons and a thirst for conquest. For 7 days and nights, he ravaged Ereshkigal's domain until the queen herself lay vulnerable. Yet in a shocking pivot, the two became lovers, and Nergal claimed the throne beside her, transforming from invader to co-ruler in a single breath. This isn't just a power grab, it's a mirror held up to Mesopotamia's darkest fears. Nergal embodied the dual threats of war and pestilence, his very presence a reminder that death came not just as a silent shadow, but as a force of chaotic decay. Tablets from the city of Cutha depict him gripping a sickle-shaped sword, his lion-headed mace dripping with the blood of cities. Yet his union with Ereshkigal, goddess of sterile dust, created a perverse balance, the destroyer and the barren, together holding the scales of mortality. The parallels to Persephone's story are uncanny, yet inverted. Where Hades seized his bride by force, Nergal was first dominated. Ereshkigal threatened to raise the dead to devour the living unless the gods handed him over. And while Persephone's abduction brought seasonal cycles, Nergal's reign unleashed something far more sinister, the institutionalization of plague as a tool of divine will. Babylonian texts show priests invoking him during epidemics, begging him to turn his wrath elsewhere, while amulets bearing his symbol, a staff entwined with serpents, were buried with the dead to ward off his demons. What makes this myth so unsettling is its bureaucratic brutality. Later versions describe Nergal and Ereshkigal presiding over a nightmarish courtroom where souls were judged not for their virtue, but for their usefulness. The able-bodied were pressed into service as ghostly laborers, while the weak were cast into the land of no return, a void beyond even Ker's horrors. Modern excavations at Sippar unearthed clay tablets detailing this system, with lists of the dead assigned to dig canals or build palaces for the underworld's elite, proof that the Mesopotamians saw the afterlife as a grim extension of earthly inequalities. Yet Nergal's legacy isn't all terror. In the city of Tarbisu, archaeologists found a temple where he was worshipped as a protector, his plague-bearing arrows now aimed at invaders. This duality, devastator and defender, captures the Mesopotamian worldview. Death was inevitable, but with the right offerings, even its rulers could be bargained with. It's a lesson etched into every cuneiform prayer, every amulet pressed into a grave, that in the face of the inevitable, humanity's greatest weapon has always been audacity. Nergal didn't bow, neither would they. If Ereshkigal ruled Ker with the cold order of a queen, her demonic daughter Lamashtu embodied pure, feral terror, a nightmare stalking the cradle rather than the battlefield. Unlike the Underworld's other denizens, Lamashtu wasn't content with claiming the dead. She slithered into the world of the living, targeting the most vulnerable, newborns and pregnant women. Ancient clay tablets describe her in grotesque detail. A lioness-headed hag with donkey teeth, her taloned hands clutching serpents, her naked body slick with the blood of stolen infants. This wasn't just a demon, she was the personification of every parent's primal dread, the shadow lurking behind stillbirths and fevers. Her origin story reveals a shocking twist. Lamashtu wasn't always an outcast. Some texts suggest she was once a high-ranking underworld deity, possibly even Ereshkigal's favored daughter, until her bloodlust grew too monstrous even for the realm of the dead. Exiled by her own mother, she became a rogue force unbound by divine laws. Where other underworld figures operated within hierarchies, Hades with his bureaucracy, Yomi with his karmic ledgers, Lamashtu answered to no one. She didn't snatch souls for judgment or rebirth. She devoured them for sheer hunger, leaving behind only the shriveled husks of cribs and wailing mothers. The terror she inspired birthed one of history's most elaborate systems of protection. Apotropaic amulets against Lamashtu have been unearthed by the hundreds across Mesopotamia, often buried under household thresholds or tied to cradle posts. These weren't simple trinkets, they were miniature exorcisms cast in metal and stone. Bronze plaques depicted the demoness bound and gagged, pinned under the hooves of the god Pazuzu, her unlikely nemesis, a wind demon ironically invoked to repel her. Clay Lamashtu bowls were inscribed with spells and inverted to trap her influence, while pregnant women wore necklaces of iron and lapis lazuli, materials believed to turn her venomous touch. What's chilling is how these artifacts reveal societal anxieties. Infant mortality rates in ancient Mesopotamia were staggering. Archaeologists estimate nearly half of all children died before age 5. Lamashtu gave tangible form to that grief, a foe to blame and rituals to regain control. Excavations at Nippur uncovered a particularly haunting amulet, a terracotta plaque showing a mother offering Lamashtu a substitute, a date cluster fashioned into a doll, to distract her from the real child. This wasn't mere superstition, it was psychological survival, a way to channel helplessness into action. Yet Lamashtu's legacy slithered beyond her era. Medieval Jewish incantation bowls from Babylon borrowed her imagery for demon-blocking spells, while some scholars trace echoes of her in Lilith's later mythology. Even today, in parts of Iraq and Syria, folk healers whisper ancient-sounding charms over cradles, a whisper of defiance against a demoness who, in the collective memory, never truly died. Her story warns that the underworld's greatest threats aren't always its rulers. Sometimes they're the outcasts, the ones with nothing left to lose, who claw their way back into the light to feast on the living. Beyond the frozen marshes and whispering pines of Finnish legend lies Tuonla, an island of the dead surrounded by a river black as tar and churning with needles. This wasn't some fiery inferno or misty underworld. It was a cold, silent prison, its shores patrolled by Tuoni's spectral children, its air thick with the weight of forgotten names. When the great bard Vainamarainen set out to cross those deadly waters, he wasn't seeking immortality or love. He needed knowledge, the secret charms known only to the dead. But Tuonla didn't surrender its wisdom easily. The journey began with a deception. Disguised as a serpent, Vainamarainen slithered into the river's currents, only for the water itself to rebel. Needles of bone and iron tore at his flesh, each one humming with curses, while unseen voices whispered warnings in a language older than the stars. What makes this river so unnerving isn't just its physical horror, it's the symbolism. In Finnish folklore, needles weren't mere tools. They stitched the fabric of fate, mended wounds, and warded off evil. Here, they became weapons, turning the very objects of healing into instruments of agony. Tuoni's daughter, the Death Maiden, caught Vainamarainen mid-passage, her laughter like cracking ice. She demanded he prove his worth, not with strength but with song. This was the crux of Tuonla's trials. The dead respected only those who could weave magic with words. Vainamarainen's response wasn't a battle cry, it was a spell, a melody so potent it stilled the river's needles and forced the gates open. But his victory came at a cost. The moment he stepped onto that ashen shore, the dead swarmed him, not as enemies but as starving petitioners. They clawed at his cloak, begging for news of the living world, their hollow eyes reflecting a truth far worse than torment, eternal disconnection. What followed was a masterclass in shamanic soul retrieval. The Finns believed that illness and misfortune often stemmed from lost fragments of the soul, stolen by Tuoni's agents or trapped in the underworld. Vainamarainen's quest mirrored the rituals of Noita shamans, who would enter trance states to bargain with Tuonla's rulers. Archaeological finds in Lapland reveal bone drums etched with maps of the underworld, their beats guiding these practitioners through the river's hazards. Some incantations preserved on 19th century scrolls even echo Vainamarainen's pleas word for word appeals to Tuoni's wife Loviatta, the blind goddess of plagues, whose mercy might loosen a soul's chains. The most haunting detail, Vainamarainen never truly escaped. Though he fled Tuonla with the dead secrets, the epic poem Kalevala hints that part of him remained, a shadow self left behind as payment. Modern Finnish folk healers still speak of this exchange. To heal the sick, they might leave offerings at crossroads, silver coins, strands of hair, or drops of blood, small sacrifices to balance the scales between worlds. Even today, when the northern lights flicker over snowbound forests, some swear they glimpse figures moving along that black river, their outlines blurred like half-remembered verses. Tuonla's genius lies in its intimacy. This wasn't a distant hell for the wicked, it was a shared space, a reminder that the living and dead were never fully separate. Every time a shaman's drum sounded, every time a family set an extra plate at midwinter feast, they were reaching across that needle-filled water, stitching the worlds together one thread at a time. The River of Needles wasn't the only secret Tuonla guarded. Its shadow stretched all the way to the forging of the Sampo, the mythical mill that churned out endless fortune. According to the Kalevala, this wasn't just a magical artifact. It was the linchpin of cosmic balance, crafted from the bones of the earth and the whispers of the dead. The blacksmith Ilmarinen, greatest of craftsmen, didn't hammer it into existence in some celestial workshop. He descended into Tuonla's echoes, bargaining with spirits for the knowledge to shape its parts. The lid from the sky's dome, the body from the world tree's roots, the mechanism from the teeth of wolves that prowled the underworld's edge. Every component carried a price. Each nail driven into the Sampo's frame required a drop of Ilmarinen's blood, a literal infusion of life into the machinery of fate. But why would Tuoni's realm, so jealous of its secrets, allow such a treasure to pass into the living world? The answer lies in the Sampo's dual nature. While it spun gold and grain for those who possessed it, it also ground out misfortune and discord when mishandled. This wasn't a gift, it was a test. The dead understood what the living often forgot. Abundance without balance is a curse in disguise. When the Sampo was eventually stolen and shattered, its fragments didn't simply vanish. Some sank into the sea, churning the waves into salt, a reminder that even broken, the underworld's bargains ripple through existence. The connection between Tuonla and the Sampo reveals a chilling truth about Finnish cosmology. The underworld wasn't just a repository of the dead, it was a wellspring of primal forces too volatile for the living to wield unchecked. Shamans spoke of Sampo's song, a melody that could temporarily align its power, but only if sung with the same words Vainamarainen used to placate the Death Maiden. Modern archaeologists have uncovered bronze amulets near Kerlia depicting the Sampo not as a mill, but as a triple spiral symbolizing its ties to the three realms of earth, sky, and underworld. Even the act of grinding took on deeper meaning. Rune stones describe it as the dead turning the wheel, implying the Sampo's operation required unseen hands. Yet the most haunting legacy of this bond is how it mirrors real-world struggles. Finland's harsh climate made survival a constant negotiation between scarcity and prosperity, much like Ilmarinen's bargains with Tuoni. Folk spells to protect crops often invoke the Sampo's lid, not to summon wealth but to shield against the grinding of the north wind, a poetic nod to the Underworld's icy breath. In a sense, the Sampo was less a magic mill and more a metaphor for humanity's fragile pact with forces beyond their control. Break the agreement and the needles return. Forget the songs and the river rises. High above the earthly realm, where the blue vault of the Yoruba heavens splits into twin afterlives, lies a place that shatters all expectations of divine justice. Orunapadi, the heaven of potsherds, isn't some blazing inferno or frozen wasteland. It's a sprawling, sun-baked ruin of broken clay, where dishonorable souls wander aimlessly among shattered pottery and crumbling walls, their existence as fragmented as the ground beneath their feet. Unlike the orderly punishments of other underworlds, this realm embodies a uniquely Yoruba terror, not torment but irrelevance. Imagine stepping into a landscape where every surface crackles with the echoes of poor choices. The very earth is paved with discarded pottery shards that slice at bare feet with each step, each shard symbolizing broken promises, squandered opportunities, and moral failures. There's no fire here, no demons with whips, just an endless, parched expanse where souls are condemned to rebuild what they destroyed in life, stacking potsherds into unstable towers that collapse before completion. This isn't torture for spectacle, it's futility as theology. The Yoruba understanding of dishonor wasn't about sin in the Western sense, but about disrupting communal harmony. A coward who fled battle, a trader who hoarded wealth during famine, a parent who neglected ancestral rites, all found themselves here, not screaming in agony but sighing in tedium, trapped in a loop of unfulfillment. Contrast this with Orunrira, the good heaven, where worthy souls revel in endless festivals. There, the air hums with the music of talking drums, and ancestors feast on spiritual versions of their favorite earthly dishes, pounded yams so soft it melts like mist, palm wine that never runs dry. But what makes this duality so striking is how it reflects Yoruba social values. Orunrira's paradise isn't about individual salvation but collective joy. Spirits dance in interconnected circles, their movements mirroring the Egungun masquerades of the living, where masked dancers embody ancestral unity. Meanwhile, Orunapadi's fractures mirror the isolation of those who rejected interdependence. Archaeology breathes life into this myth. In the ancient city of Isle Ife, excavations uncovered ritual potsherd pavements, deliberately broken ceramics pressed into sacred ground, possibly echoing Orunapadi's symbolism. Even today, Yoruba funerals include the deliberate shattering of pottery, an act that some scholars link to severing the deceased's earthly ties while warning the living of Orunapadi's fractured fate. Modern artists like Nike Okunde weave these themes into tapestries, depicting the two heavens as interlocking spirals, one smooth and radiant, the other jagged and disjointed. The true horror of Orunapadi lies in its psychological precision. Where other underworlds punish the body, this one targets identity. Without community, without purpose, the soul isn't just pained, it's erased piece by piece like pottery worn to dust underfoot. In a culture where the proverb, "I am because we are," carries the weight of divine truth, perhaps no fate could be more devastating than permanent exile from the chorus of existence. Eshu doesn't just walk between worlds, he dances, laughing as he flips the rules upside down. In Yoruba cosmology, where the crossroads divide the living from the dead, this trickster god holds the keys to both, and his mischief isn't random chaos, it's a cosmic balancing act. Picture him in his signature crimson and black garments, his staff tapping the ground where paths converge, his laughter echoing as he watches mortals swear oaths they don't intend to keep. But here's the twist: Eshu's pranks aren't just for fun. When vows are broken, when trust is shattered, he becomes the enforcer no one sees coming, escorting oath breakers straight to the outskirts of Orunapadi, the heaven of potsherds where the shards of their promises cut their feet with every step. One legendary tale tells of a wealthy merchant who swore on the gods to share his fortune with the poor, then hoarded every grain. Eshu didn't strike him down. Instead, he disguised himself as a beggar, stumbling into the man's path with a broken gourd. When the merchant kicked him aside, Eshu tipped the gourd, spilling invisible curses that tangled the man's finances like a knotted rope. Within days, the merchant's warehouses stood empty, his gold turned to dust, and his spirit found itself wandering Orunapadi's wastes, endlessly counting phantom coins that slipped through his fingers. What makes Eshu's role so fascinating is its duality. He's not a traditional judge like Yama or Osiris, he's chaos with a purpose. The Yoruba say he opens the way, not just between physical spaces, but between moral consequences. An oath sworn at a crossroads invokes him by default, and breaking it doesn't just anger the gods, it insults Eshu personally. Archaeologists digging at Oyo Isle uncovered ancient oath-taking artifacts, small iron staffs and cowrie shells arranged at crossroads, remnants of rituals meant to placate him. Even today, diviners casting the opal chain watch for Eshu's signs, knowing his presence can turn a minor misstep into a one-way trip to the Underworld's outskirts. Yet Eshu's justice isn't rigid. He punishes not the flawed but the hypocritical, those who feign honor while scheming in shadows. In one oral tradition, a queen publicly vowed fidelity while secretly plotting against her king. Eshu didn't expose her, he amplified her deceit until her lies grew so heavy, they dragged her into the earth itself, burying her alive in a chamber between worlds where she could hear the celebrations of the honorable dead but never join them. Modern Yoruba communities still feel his influence. When contracts are signed, a dash of palm oil might be sprinkled at the threshold, a nod to Eshu's love of offerings, ensuring he witnesses the agreement. And those who betray trust, they're not called cursed, they're called Eshu's toys, left to tumble through life's uncertainties until they learn the weight of their word. Because in the end, the trickster doesn't just guard the crossroads, he makes sure everyone pays their fare. In the stark, wind-swept deserts of ancient Persia, where fire temples cast long shadows, the Zoroastrians envisioned an underworld so precise in its torment it could chill the soul of even the most devout. Duat, the House of Lies, wasn't just a place of punishment, it was a meticulously designed inversion of the faith's core tenets. Picture 3 concentric realms, each one amplifying suffering based on the soul's misdeeds. The outermost layer, Hammerstagen, held those whose virtues and sins balanced like scales, neither rewarded nor tormented, but left in a numb limbo where time itself seemed to stagnate. But step deeper into Misvangatu, the place of the mixed, and the air thickened with the stench of rotting spirits, their essence gnawed by invisible worms as they relived every moral compromise. At the heart of it all lay worst existence, a pit of absolute darkness where the irredeemable murderers, oath-breakers, defilers of purity, writhed in a substance called visage, a molten spiritual filth that seared without consuming, leaving the soul eternally flayed but never released. What makes Duat so terrifying isn't just its brutality, but its logic. Each punishment mirrored the crime with poetic precision. Liars found their tongues fused to their jaws, forced to choke on their own deceit. Those who polluted fire, Zoroastrianism's holiest symbol, were suspended over infernos that burned but never cleansed. Even the architecture reflected the faith's dualistic worldview. The bridge to Duat, Chinvat, narrowed to a razor's edge for the wicked, while the righteous strode across it as if it were a sunlit road. Yet the Zoroastrians didn't just fear the House of Lies, they engineered their entire lives to evade it. the Tower of Silence, or Dakma, stands as one of history's most striking funerary innovations. Instead of burying or burning the dead, they exposed corpses atop circular stone platforms, allowing vultures to strip the flesh swiftly. This wasn't mere pragmatism, it was theological calculus. Earth and fire were sacred, too pure to be tainted by decay. By surrendering the body to scavengers, the soul was freed faster, its physical shell dissolved without polluting creation. Modern aerial surveys of these towers reveal their meticulous design, concentric rings separating men, women, and children, each corpse positioned so no shadow fell upon another, preserving individual dignity even in dissolution. But purity rituals extended far beyond death. Zoroastrians practiced barashnam, a 9-night purification rite involving scoured sand, consecrated bull's urine, and repeated ablutions. Manuscripts from Yazd describe penitents reciting prayers while standing in pits, their very footprints erased afterward to symbolize the obliteration of spiritual stains. These weren't empty gestures, they were survival tactics. In a universe where a single unclean thought could tip the scales toward Duzak, vigilance was the price of salvation. Fascinatingly, Duzak's influence slithered beyond Persia. Some scholars trace echoes of its 3-tiered structure in Dante's Inferno, while the concept of visage resurfaced in medieval Christian descriptions of hell's undying worms. Even today, Mumbai's Parsi community maintains the Towers of Silence, though urban sprawl and dwindling vulture populations have forced adaptations. Solar concentrators now aid decomposition, a fusion of ancient faith and modern innovation. The genius and horror of Duzak lies in its clarity. Unlike the ambiguous gloom of Hades or the bureaucratic maze of Diyu, it offered no mysteries. Your fate was the sum of your choices, measured against the unflinching light of Ahura Mazda's wisdom. The House of Lies didn't deceive, it merely showed you with unbearable precision what you'd already built for yourself. The Chinvat Bridge wasn't just a crossing, it was a moral litmus test stretched over an abyss, its stones reacting to the weight of a soul's every choice. In Zoroastrian tradition, this perilous span determined whether the dead would ascend to the House of Song or plunge into the House of Lies. For the righteous, the bridge widened into a sunlit boulevard, fragrant with the scent of sacred Hayama plants. But for sinners, it transformed. The same path they'd built with their deeds became a razor's edge, its surface slick with spiritual residue, narrowing until even the slightest misstep sent them spiraling into darkness. This wasn't arbitrary punishment, it was physics of the soul. The bridge's narrowing mirrored the suffocating consequences of deceit, each lie told in life constricting the path like a noose. Compare this to Islam's Surat Bridge, thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword, straddling the fires of Jahannam. Both bridges demand balance, but where Chinvat judges past actions, Surat tests present purity. Quranic traditions describe the faithful crossing swiftly, their light guiding them while the wicked teeter and fall, weighed down by unrepentant hearts. The imagery isn't coincidence. Scholars trace these parallels to Zoroastrianism's influence on early Abrahamic thought. Yet there's a crucial divergence. Chinvat's judgment is final, while Surat offers Allah's mercy even mid-plunge, a thread of hope in the freefall. Christian iconography leans into different metaphors, the scales of St. Michael, the separating of sheep and goats, but the underlying principle resonates. Medieval frescoes in European churches often depict narrow gates or crumbling paths for the damned, echoing that same visceral link between moral decay and unstable footing. Dante's Inferno takes it further. His bridges over mailbulges pits aren't just crossings but obstacles, forcing sinners to confront the architecture of their own corruption. What unites these visions isn't just fear, it's accountability made tangible. A bridge that narrows isn't merely a threat, it's a revelation. Every step taken in life, every compromise or act of integrity literally shapes the road ahead. Modern psychology might call this cognitive dissonance the way guilt erodes confidence, how dishonesty breeds instability. The ancients encoded it in stone and fire, a warning etched across cultures: the tighter the lie, the thinner the ledge. And when the chasm opens beneath you, it's not the gods who push, it's the weight of everything you pretended not to carry. From the icy wastes of Helheim to the golden fields of Anon, from the bureaucratic hells of Diyu to the shifting dreamscapes of the aboriginal land of the dead, we've journeyed through 35 astonishing visions of the afterlife, and yet we've barely scratched the surface. What's remarkable isn't just the diversity of these underworlds, but the eerie threads that bind them together. Whether it's the scales of Maat in Egypt or the razor-thin Chinvat bridge of Zoroastrianism, cultures separated by continents and centuries all grappled with the same fundamental questions. What do we owe one another? How do we face the unknown? And what survives of us when the last breath leaves our bodies? These myths weren't just fireside entertainment. They were moral compasses, survival guides, and sometimes, like in the story of Sedna, urgent warnings about the consequences of neglecting the world around us. The Aztecs feared Mictlán's trials, but they also saw them as necessary purification. The Greeks dreaded Hades' apathy, yet found strange comfort in its predictability. Even the most terrifying underworld served a purpose: to remind the living that choices echo beyond our brief flicker of existence. But here's what fascinates me most. However harsh these realms seemed, they almost always left room for hope. Inanna rose from the dead. Orpheus's music still stirs our hearts. The hero twins outsmarted the lords of Xibalba. These aren't just tales of punishment, they're testaments to resilience, to the stubborn human belief that even in the face of oblivion, there's a way forward. Or if not forward, then at least a way to leave a mark. So now I'd love to hear from you. Which underworld myth lingers in your thoughts? Maybe it's the haunting beauty of the Zoria sisters guarding the stars, or the brutal justice of Naraka's 28 hells. Perhaps you've got a local legend about the afterlife that we didn't cover, some whispered story passed down in your family or culture. Drop it in the comments below and let's keep the conversation alive. After all, if these myths teach us anything, it's that stories are the one thing death can't touch. They're our compass, our comfort, and sometimes our only torchlight in the dark. Thanks for joining me on this journey. May your path always be wider than Chinvat Bridge, and may your myths